Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. In 2010, today's guest published what is arguably the most important book of the 21st century. She is a former professor of engineering mechanics with degrees in civil engineering, structural engineering, applied physics and materials engineering science. Her book, entitled Where Did the Towers Go?, provides the only comprehensive scientific investigation into the events of 9/11 in the public domain. The conclusions are staggering, which are that two of the world's tallest, strongest buildings and most of their contents were literally turned to dust by an advanced, covert energy weapon. Not by planes, not by bombs, and not by nukes, but by a non-kinetic energy weapon. Welcome, Judy Wood.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Or should I say Dr. Judy Wood. Now, we'll just start, Judy. You've come to the UK quite recently and you've been on a lecture tour. Can you just give us a brief outline of that?
Of where I've been?
Where you've been and how it's been received.
It's been received very well, and I feel lucky to be among such wonderful people who appreciate understanding and who really want to know about what's going on, rather than being alive and thinking, rather than just going along with whatever flow and just being led down whatever path.
This is what actually happened. What you've seen tonight is what actually happened. It's not a theory.
This is slow motion, and there are various pieces falling, but notice they're trailing dust. And there's a piece that'll emerge right in here, and watch how it trails dust and then it runs out of dust because it's gone. This piece right here.
So what kind of subjects did you lecture in then?
I lectured in mechanics of materials.
Mechanics of materials, okay.
Does it strike you through the powder?
Yeah, I mean, that's right.
Been to Penzance, Brighton, the outskirts of Brighton, and then Gravesend, and then near Manchester, and then Northampton, and then tomorrow we go to
Aberdeen?
Aberdeen, thank you. Aberdeen, and then Edinburgh, and then Glasgow, and then down to Cardiff. Okay,
and viewers can watch the two previous interviews that I did with Judy Wood because there's quite a lot of detail in those interviews. Prior to the tour that you're doing now, you spoke at an energy conference, a free energy conference, was that?
It was about new energy. They call it breakthrough energy, the breakthrough energy movement, because I think free energy has gotten a bad name and it has bad connotations with it. But it was a wonderful conference put on over 3 days just outside of Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
Yeah, in Hilversum, I think the name of the town. It was terrific people, and it was interesting. The last night, it's like nobody wanted to leave and say goodbye, and we're up till 3 a.m. talking.
So a lot of the speakers there are putting forward the case that there are certain technologies which have possibly been suppressed which would solve the world's energy crisis and get us off fossil fuels.
That's what the aim is.
Okay, and were there any extremely convincing technologies discussed at that conference?
I wasn't so much looking at that. I'm looking at more of the direction I'm coming from, which is a demonstration of free energy technology rather than it's right around the corner, it's right around the corner. We hear that so much, and sometimes it's for real and sometimes it's a distraction. But what I found there is people were very receptive to what I was showing. They had originally poo-pooed it and were convinced that I was talking nonsense because they'd heard that from others. But I had a wonderful reception. People sort of turned 180 degrees.
Because what you're saying is that somebody already has this technology and they've used it
and demonstrated to us.
Yeah, demonstrated to us in the form of a weapon.
Yes.
which we will come on to. So you describe it as a non-kinetic weapon. Can you just for viewers describe the difference between kinetic and non-kinetic?
Well, kinetic being like heat. Nuke bombs have a whole tremendous amount of heat, or regular bombs, chunks go flying, break things into parts. Missiles, something moves and hits something else, wrecking balls, something pounding on something or heating something up. But there are other types of weapons that don't heat something, but affect it. What I mean by directed energy, the energy is, in the most general sense, it's directed geographically only to affect this particular place and not across the street, but also the energy is directed as in giving it instructions what to do differently than energy normally does.
All right, so it's not just directed in terms of its position, it's directed in terms of its instructions. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Because the equation that I remember from physics of a kinetic energy weapon would be the energy in a cricket ball. If you throw a cricket ball, that's a kinetic energy weapon, is a half mv squared, which is a half times the mass of the cricket ball times its velocity squared, gives you the amount of energy in that energy weapon, because a cricket ball is an energy weapon, really.
Or sending somebody in croquet, you get two balls, you put your foot on one, you whack this one, that one takes off.
So this is non-kinetic.
Right.
Right. Now, does that mean it's electromagnetic, or can you explain what it actually is?
It's various things. What I call it is magnetic electrogravitic nuclear reactions. It involves magnetism, electricity, gravity, and it causes nuclear reactions.
Right. And one analogy that people can think of is their microwave oven as being an example of directed energy.
Yeah, or lasers.
Or lasers.
Those are line of sight, or I guess microwave sometimes is in a region, but this is a combination of different types of energy that create different effects and interact.
Right. Now let's just summarize the reason why you state that the towers didn't hit the ground.
Well, they didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground, but turned into dust in midair. And we know that because if they slammed to the ground, we'd have a pile of rubble left over. If they slammed to the ground, the seismic signal would have shown that, which it didn't. And if they slammed to the ground, they're actually built in the Hudson River, 70 feet below the water table on bedrock. And so there's this dike around them. You get two 500,000-ton buildings and another 250,000-ton building and slam it down, you're going to bust the water retaining wall.
And there's a whole lot of other evidence concerning things that were made of metal that were isolated from the ground, such as cars that had all of these bizarre effects that you wouldn't have expected if two buildings had collapsed through a conventional means.
The effects were material specific.
All right. Now, normally you would focus strictly on the physical evidence, and you have done so far in your book and in your lectures. But this time in this tour, you're speaking more about the cover-up of this information and how that cover-up has been orchestrated and the psychology behind it. Can you just explain that for us, Judy?
Yes, the buildings turned to dust in midair. If you look at it, you can see that. Why do so many people not see it? Why was nearly the entire world fooled that day? And in order for people to see what happened, they have to figure out how to get around this. And I found there's three things that keep them from seeing it. Number one, problem-solving skills. Number two, groupthink or peer pressure. And number three, they're terrified by the implications. But of the problem-solving skills, I've said this before about the importance of first determining what happened before you can determine how it happened. You have to determine what it is, and that before you can determine who did it or why they did it and so forth. And what I've discovered is one of the easiest ways to run a cover-up and to keep the cover-up safe is to get folks to focus on how it happened. Because if you start out with how it happened before you've determined what it is, you're assuming what it is. So you're solving an imagined problem, not a real problem. You haven't defined the problem. When I teach in statics class, first thing you have to teach students is to make the problem statement. Here's the problem statement. Here's what you're looking for. Here's the information given. Draw a line, what you're going to look for. Draw a line, go about solving it. And you have to define that problem before you can solve it. Once you define it, it gets a lot easier to solve.
Right.
And few people do that. So if you get people to focus on how it was done, they go round and round arguing about opinions of whatever, and they never will solve it.
And it will create contention within that as well. I've actually, in my talks, call it a phony bone of contention, which is contention around something which has a flawed assumption within it.
And it goes round, 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 round.
Okay. All right. And I know that Andrew Johnson has spoken at length and written a book about the 9/11 cover-up.
Yep. Another thing that I often talk about, you know, if you don't like the lie behind door number 1, they'll show you lie behind door number 2. You don't like that one, lie behind door number 3. Whatever to keep you from looking at the open field behind you.
And you talk about the psychology of denial because the implications are just too grotesque for people to face. And I'm actually experiencing that with some British members of Parliament that I've been writing to about another thing, which is the 7/7 London bombings. And I would describe them as being in, well, some kind of psychotic state, which is it's denial. They're not even looking at the evidence.
Do you remember in first grade, there was usually, at least when I was in first grade, that's what it was going on, about Santa Claus, the Santa Claus myth. And some kid would tell others that Santa Claus doesn't exist, and they'd all get mad at him. No, it does exist. And some kids would be crying if they learned about that. I guess kids are actually learning earlier now because they're exposed to that. But the anger in that, it's just like the end of the world. To learn that what they know doesn't exist, or to learn that their parents lied to them in this con job, and actually think it might be a good thing to help them get used to the idea that they can be conned.
Now, for those who actually question whether or not the towers did in fact turn to dust in midair, there's a clip which I don't think I've shown on Rich Planet before of, if you just describe this clip, Judy, I don't think I've seen this one.
If you look at this is the northwest corner of the North Tower. You see that vertical line near the center of the image, and you'll notice in a little bit there will be a whitish beam that you'll see dropping down. And it'll emerge, and as it emerges you see this opaque trail of dust behind it. And it becomes clearer and clearer, it's trailing dust, then pretty soon it runs out of dust to trail because it no longer exists. It becomes dust. And then when you look at it at full speed, you not only realize this beam is doing that, but everything in the image is doing that. And if you look down at the intersection right after where that stuff was falling, it's not there. It's just paper.
Now this process, which we're seeing in that image, you have linked it to something which is akin to or similar to cold fusion. And in a cold...
It has a lot of similarities with what was called cold fusion, low energy nuclear reaction.
A low energy nuclear reaction. And this was something which was covered up in the late 1980s, early 1990s.
1989.
Right, and so it's a technology which you think was taken over by the military, presumably.
Yeah, I never know when, officials have it. If it pops out in the public domain, maybe they may try to shut it down. I have a feeling that, top secret places, wherever, black technology, it's there already. But in 1989, this popped out. It's the work of Pons and Fleischmann. But the significant thing that was discovered then was this type of reaction. It was through electrolysis, an electrolytic process, and they found transmutation, different metals forming on the electrodes that, they don't know where it came from. It indicated there was a nuclear process going on, as well as the tritium that was measured. And tritium, up until that point, had only been found in like nuke bombs, where you get other types of ionizing radiation, the kind of thing where Geiger counters are going to go off, that you would find. And they were first saying that Pons and Fleischmann were bogus because of this only tritium and not the other. And John Bockris actually was the first to discover this tritium, and somebody wrote this nasty article, I think in Science magazine, saying he must have spiked his sample with tritium, because why else isn't this other stuff there? And Pons and Fleischmann would be dead if this really was. so there's a lot of data on that, and it's been sorted out.
We can put this graph on the screen, which is what was measured at the World Trade Center site after the events. Just explain the graph for us, Judy.
On the right-hand side, you'll see a logarithmic scale, and I've given samples of different things that have been measured. Over on the left-hand side, at the bottom, you'll see it starts at 1963 to about 1990, and it's showing the decrease in the tritium levels in the Great Lakes. And that tritium was there because of atmospheric nuclear bomb testing. And you can see it decreases, and it has a half-life of about 12.5 years. The next one over is current measurements in the Great Lakes. And then the yellow one in the middle is the actual measurements that were taken shortly after 9/11, where there's these very high levels of tritium that are not just random high normal. There's definitely a source of something that put tritium there.
So the appearance of this thing called tritium, which is
indicates, is no doubt there was some sort of nuclear reaction going on.
Right.
It actually absolutely confirmed. Now, there also was no ionizing radiation recorded. Nobody with Geiger counters came around and found anything. And if you remember Chernobyl, I've got a diagram in the book and with a question asking, do you think they could have kept Chernobyl a secret? Because it shows the measurements all around the planet of the fallout from that. And there was no such measurements on 9/11.
Yeah, because this is one of the three alternative theories that people put forward, is that it was done by some kind of nuclear weapon.
Somebody around the planet would have been measuring it.
Right, so there would have been fallout measured around the site of 9/11, and there was no fallout radiation, but there was the presence of tritium.
Yes.
So the process of cold fusion is something which creates tritium in those sort of quantities. So you think it's something similar?
That, yeah, and the third one, I mean the fourth value over is values that you measure in LENR, low energy nuclear reactions, or cold fusion. And at the far end of the scale is what comes from, the source is leaky nuclear plants, which is sky high. It's like 18,000 times what was measured at the World Trade Center. So the closest, if you look at the order of magnitude measured, was low energy nuclear reactions of all those choices of the sources. And if you have fire hoses on it and so forth, you're going to get it pretty watered down.
Rich Planet TV is coming to a town near you. In May 2013, I will be travelling around the UK speaking at the following places: Gateshead, Glasgow, Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham, Weston-super, Southampton, Reading and London. I'll be covering recent UFO reports, which is not to be missed, and exposing a range of issues you won't find discussed on mainstream TV. Get ticket details from the richplanet.net website. Welcome back. I'm talking to Dr. Judy Wood about 9/11. Now, I've also interviewed a chap called Dr. Nick Colostrom all about 7/7, which, in my opinion, is another false flag attack, this time on London. And Nick said in one of our interviews that the state, in inverted commas, because it's not the members of Parliament doing this, we know that it lies above or beyond that, stakes everything.
The crew.
Yeah, the crew. The crew. The state stakes everything on this. And I said to him, well, what do you mean by that? If it's fully exposed and justice is served, that you mean the state has to fall in order for the truth to come out on it fully? And he said, yeah. And I thought, wow, we can't just arrest the ones responsible and lock them up. So you don't quite agree with that, Judy, do you?
I would say 9/11, everything intersects here. The whole world is affected with that. And what I have found is that various other events, folks are willing to sacrifice that to save the issue of 9/11. 9/11, everything is on that. And if for example, if a third of the people in the world read this book in the next couple of weeks, the crew would be undermined.
So what you're saying is that the technology used to do 9/11, that's the ultimate thing, information they're protecting, and they'll sacrifice everything.
And not just the technology.
Right.
9/11 was an attack on human consciousness. It psychologically has controlled everyone. Not everyone, but the vast majority. And there's so many issues that control is used for, that there's so much, like, so many things are connected to the 9/11 thing. The 7/7 is a nice kind of distraction from that. Yeah, the story isn't as advertised. So the story comes out, and they would be willing to sacrifice that for sure, easily, to protect the 9/11 thing. They could come out and say, well, you know, okay, we got it wrong, you know. As I say, it's like the wrong party was given the traffic ticket 10 years ago. That, okay, we got this wrong, and it doesn't really change a whole lot, because that's water under the bridge by now.
But do you not think that, let's just say that the truth came out about 7/7, and they arrested the guy who I want arrested, which is Peter Power, questioned him, found out who organised the terror drill.
We have one bad guy, you know. Yeah.
And then
one bad apple.
And then put them all on trial. Well, put them all on trial, whatever team did it, and so you would 9/11 not be the next domino? Or
no, that one is totally, you know, several layers way, but it involves the whole planet.
Right.
But there's something I've found very similar between the two. 3 + 1 = 4.
Right.
3 planes in buildings, 1 in the ground, as the story goes.
All right, I see.
And 3 in the tubes, 1 in the bus.
One, right, all right.
That one, it can happen anywhere.
Right, so they've got 3 actual physical geographical targets plus 1 roaming target.
Yeah, one wild card.
Right. So you think that that's done like that for a reason then? Or?
Yeah, the one in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That you're not safe anywhere. Don't go to the cities. Don't go to the cities. Don't go in the tubes. But you're not safe anywhere.
Right. All right.
I think that's
part of the psychology behind it.
Yep.
Right. All right.
I don't know if we need to say that or
no,
not.
I've never thought of that before. Okay.
3 + 1 = 4.
Judy's just set a laptop up because she's going to show a little clip of Professor Stephen E. Jones, and this was a sort of a seminal moment in the cover-up of the cold fusion technology, where he's sitting there with a panel of scientists and they're all voting on whether cold fusion works or not. And you think there's a great deal of peer pressure going on in this conference?
Right. It's
just explain it for us, Judy.
Yeah, they're voting. Well, Stephen Jones holds up his hand to get everyone else to hold up their hand to vote against considering any sort of seriousness with the work of Pons and Fleischmann. That their work is dead. Time to move on and just forget about that.
Yeah.
And the idea of, you know, following along, you know, Stephen Jones holds up his hand and then asks the question, you know, is it, we'll agree it's dead, and then others hold up their hand, physicists at the table. I don't even think they realize what they're doing. And they hold up their hand. I've seen him do that with 9/11 material, that people tend to just go with the flow. They go with the leader of a group.
It sounds like something from the Middle Ages.
But we all do that to some degree.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been struggling with lately is, you know, part of the human condition.
Called like being a sheep.
Yeah, that we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every morning. We want to be able to build on something, so we make assumptions. And our society has gotten so complex, so complicated, so much time pressure that we don't have time to research things. We believe that this person has. That's what the evening news is about. And you think you can, you know, believe somebody.
And somebody who exerts their influence in order to do that, to cover things up, is known as a gatekeeper.
Yes.
And there's a chap who's been helping you, his musicians, actually written a song all about the gatekeepers.
Actually, how it began, he got my book, read it, and was so moved by it that he wrote a song called "Wake Up, This Is Your Alarm," and where the buildings go. And he summed up in just a few words how what happened on 9/11.
Where did the towers go? away with the breeze that blows. And how much steel did they find? Could it be shipped in time? I don't know, I haven't seen the receipt, but it doesn't make sense to me. All those cars in a line, door handles and engines gone. I'd tell you if I could, but you need to ask Judy Wood. Before you accuse someone, you better make damn sure you know what was done.
And then following that, he wrote this new song about the gatekeepers.
Right.
So there you go, following them, but you don't know. You're just a means to unearth the truth you seek. They want to hide, that's why they keep you close by their side. They're the gatekeepers, they hold all the keys. They're the gatekeepers, information disease. High in the sky is all you've been fed. I think that is why you forgot your own head. Sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind. That makes me believe you've lost your own minds.
Okay, and I think, well, Andrew and I have discussed in a previous show his book, 9/11 Finding the Truth, and we've alluded to this as well, that there are key people.
And others who believe in them, really believe in them, just follow them along, like voting against science.
Okay.
The idea that here's free energy technology, let's vote it off the table, and just like that, it's gone. And 20 years it took to vindicate Franz and Fleischmann, but still the rumor is still out there that that it's just bogus.
So you would argue then that those, what did you call it, the word you used for them, not the group, the crew, yeah,
the crew in charge.
The crew have taken that research and presumably spent a lot of money developing it to get it to the point where it's a weapon. Do you think that group has it for energy generation as well?
Oh, there's the black technology must be way ahead of us, and it's like a two-tiered culture where we don't know what they have, and it could be they already had that before Franz and Fleischmann. They just didn't want us to have it.
All right. So so that's why they were alerted to it so quickly, because they already knew what it was.
Yeah,
and that makes sense. So, and I know you don't like to speculate, Judy, but you've anti-gravity, energy from the vacuum.
I've got a good one for you. According to our history books, static electricity was first discovered in the year 600 BC. And then they want us to believe that it took another 2,400 years to discover electricity. Does that make sense to you? There are no electrical storms between here and there. I think that things do get discovered, but they get undiscovered and get managed.
Right. Yeah, if you go into the hidden history and the pyramids and other things, I know you've looked at Coral Castle as well and things like that.
And I've got a comparison in my book that about the stone size and the weight of the Great Pyramid. Each of the stones is about 15 tons, which is just about the same size and shape and weight of the stones that Coral Castle was built with by one guy who weighed about 120 pounds with this little chain. and but other technology.
Yeah, I've looked at because he'd had no training in electrical engineering, and he built well, he described as a generator. I've seen photographs of it. I would love to go and actually see that. So I don't know how easy it would be to do that at Coral Castle.
There's something more important there. There is a reason why you don't know. As the story goes, he'd be working at night, and he'd sense if somebody was watching and would stop.
Right.
He didn't want anyone to see what he was doing. And a lot of folks say, oh, because it was bogus. No, think about this. He was raised with a respect for this technology. Only those who have earned that respect are allowed to see that technology. And I've come to understand that in terms of the technology used on 9/11. And it's so important for the whole world to know such a technology exists. I think we need a whole generation to be raised with the respect of that technology. And then we can use it for free energy.
Right.
Because if somebody's going to be monkeying around with it, and oops, so I split the world in half. Didn't mean to.
Yeah, yeah. So that's almost providing a justification for them to cover it up, isn't it?
Right.
But
they've used it. They've used it and they displayed it in front of us, and that was a no-no.
So how would you, let's say that this technology is given to everyone in the world.
Well, if everyone looks at what happened on 9/11, they can see it. But they've been hoodwinked into thinking, you know, collapse, pile, terrorists, collapse, pile, and people think, hear those words, and then that's what they think they see. But if they open their eyes and look and observe, they'll see that a technology that was used on 9/11 is also capable of providing free energy to the world. But knowing what it can do comes first. Right.
So how I mean, I know it's a philosophical question which there may be no answer to. How is this planet of nearly 7 billion people, if the engineers of that planet are told, given the plans and the instructions
or
on
just
that,
given this book?
But what I'm saying, Judy, is yes, most engineers would go out and build a power station with it and provide energy for everyone and clean water, etc. But
not in the culture we have.
No.
The culture we have it's so cutthroat. Even in academia, your career hangs on how much grant money you get in. And if you can get in grant money with this guy's ideas, often this guy takes that guy's ideas. It's very cutthroat and manipulative, and we need to get away from that before we can move forward.
And how do you see the future, Judy? Because we've come a long way, but really
we're not there yet.
In terms of the information being accepted, you're not a long way at all. So how do you see it? Do you think in 50 years' time this will be accepted?
I think
what's the sort of time
I think
scale?
A generation of people growing up understanding this, as soon as everyone understands such technology exists, that's when we can start growing. But if we don't know that, it's going to be used like, I was giving the scenario of the different faculty members trying to get grant money. This one's trying to, you know, use this one's ideas to spring forth, or you talk about engineers making power stations. This one wants to outdo that one's power station, so he's going to, you know, everyone wants to one up the next one, and we'll end up with what we had on 9/11. That comes from, you know, power, because he who controls the energy controls the people.
Right.
And if someone is controlling energy, they need to realize controlling energy isn't the way to go, because you end up distorted.
Some people would then say, well, we need a God to sort it all out for us. Well, I know it doesn't bring in faith or anything, but not that I'm not a religious person, but in other words, an arbiter who's not on anyone's side.
I think it would solve itself if let's say everyone sees what happened on 9/11. They see the building turning to dust. They see that this technology exists. They know this technology exists. Think what that does. That keeps the technology safer, because if somebody's using it, then, ooh, everyone points at them. So everyone becomes the policeman. And then pretty soon, everyone has control of the energy for themselves. You know, everyone themselves, if we each control the energy, we nobody controls us.
Right, right. All right, Judy, well, thanks again for doing this interview, and good luck with the rest of the tour.
Thanks.
You're off to Aberdeen, I think.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, well, I hope you can understand them.
I've never been to Scotland before.
All right. Well,
you're near there, but
make sure you have some haggis. Okay?
What?
Haggis.
What's that?
Oh, don't ask what.
Oh, okay, okay.
Right. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night. Rich Planet TV is coming to a town near you. In May 2013, I will be travelling around the UK speaking at the following places: Gateshead, Glasgow, Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham, Weston-super, Southampton, Reading and London. I'll be covering recent UFO reports, which is not to be missed, and exposing a range of issues you won't find discussed on mainstream TV. Get ticket details from the richplanet.net website. Welcome back. I'm talking to Dr. Judy Wood about 9/11. Now then, Judy, some people have put forward the idea that this thing called HAARP might have been used to create this effect. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like another kind of name dropping, like Bin Laden. It's just a different boogeyman. And if you can turn a building into powder in midair, it's got to be done with a class of high technology. That technology is not going to be in the public domain. And if it's not in the public domain, we're not going to know the name of whatever technology that did this. That's why I don't bother to look at, eeny, meeny, miny, mo of the choices that are out there. Instead, this name dropping of HAARP is done so much that I've come to say that HAARP, what that stands for, is High Amplitude Advancement of Real Propaganda.
Right. Okay. Well, the other thing that people allege HAARP is used for is weather modification. And if viewers just want to go and watch the previous interviews that I did with Dr. Wood, if you go to the website richplanet.net, and on the left-hand side you click on 9/11 shows, those two interviews are in there. And in the second interview, we spoke about the hurricane. Was it a hurricane?
Yeah, Hurricane Erin.
Hurricane Erin on 9/11, which had a very peculiar path, which was a perfect straight line. It parks up outside New York, 500 miles off the coast, during the events of 9/11, and then changes direction. And you've suggested that the electrostatic field associated with that sort of...
Well, we know that I go with what I know, that, the hurricane, it's weird that it's there. The National Weather Service, in their text messaging, they thought it was going to turn around day 1. It didn't. They thought it was going to turn around day 2. It didn't. They thought it was going to turn around on day 3. It didn't. They thought it was going to turn around day 4, and thank goodness it did, because it was right outside the door of New York City. But why didn't people know about it ahead of time? But it was there, and there's no question it was there. Now, hurricanes produce static fields.
Yeah. Electrostatic field, the thing that makes your hair stand up on end when you rub it with a balloon.
And people sometimes feel a storm coming. They feel that static field.
Yes.
Birds know when to hide.
Now this is a good time to play this clip of these trucks that you showed me earlier, Judy, which is fascinating. We've just put that on the screen now. Now you can see, just to explain what's going on in this clip.
This is from a tornado earlier this year in, I think it was April 3rd, 2012.
Which also has a static field surrounding it.
Yes, this is in Dallas, Texas area. There's a bunch of tornadoes that were there, but these trucks are definitely being levitated. And notice there's no other, pieces of material. You don't have dumpsters flying up.
So we would call them articulated lorries in this country.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
So they're flying about in the sky.
Right, and there.
And you'd say that is not the wind or the gusts doing that.
If it was wind, there would be other things flying around too.
Yeah. So how are those trucks being levitated? As best you can explain that.
There is a type of field effects surrounding tornadoes and hurricanes that cause levitation. And those same kind of fields, well, we have this Hurricane Aaron right outside of Manhattan, and we do have evidence that there was static field there because there was thunder reported at JFK Airport, LaGuardia Airport, and Newark Airport. The three major airports surrounding Manhattan on 9/11 reported thunder. So we have proof that the hurricane was indeed close enough. And various weather events, you see this similar type of effects, and this is in nature. Whether or not something set off the hurricane or tornado that's unnatural, it's produced by those things.
And I do advise people to go and watch that second interview, because it does seem that there's been some orchestration behind that hurricane. So I mean, so you would say that the hurricane provided one component of the weapon?
I can't say that I know that, because I'm not in the control room. I don't, I didn't, do the event. But you can say that, weather stations normally love hurricanes. They milk them for all they can get, and we got this hurricane coming. So tune into our station. You've seen ones like this Sandy thing.
Let's just go back to HAARP then, because this is another thing that people have alleged, that they think HAARP is being used to manipulate the weather and possibly steer hurricanes. And one person who I heard recently talking about this was Stan Deo, and he said that he had checked, because apparently you can go on the internet and check where HAARP is being focused around the world or around the United States, and he's correlating that with the position of the hurricane. And what's your opinion on that?
I don't know anything about that. He has collected some nice data at times. It was many years ago, where he showed this grid work of earthquakes that was happening somewhere, and that was fascinating. I think evidence shows us the best, rather than going to any kind of names, because we're making assumptions then.
The other point that he made, Judy, not specifically about HAARP, was that, let's just say there is some manipulation going on by some party. He said that Russia and China have also got the same capability, and he said that they would have to allow it, because their technology could be used to override, let's say, whoever's doing this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is getting a little bit, a side of things, but that requires making assumptions that each country is a separate entity, and I'm not sure of that. Right. Kind of like states and so forth. We're led to believe that, for example, the different presidential candidates, you have this one versus this one, and you look back and forth, so you don't look elsewhere. I don't know who's controlling this and who is in control, who the crew is that's controlling anything. And when we start making assumptions, we're fixing to mess up.
Now, I just want to talk about Jesse Ventura. For those who don't know, Jesse Ventura is the governor of Minnesota, and he has a fairly popular TV show in the States called Conspiracy Theory.
Yeah.
He's covered many different conspiracy theories on his show, and a lot of people like it very much. And he has exposed a lot of information. Now, you took part in one of his shows. This was, when did that happen, Jude? When did you actually, when were you interviewed?
He filmed me in early September a year ago.
You at one point you thought that they'd pulled the interview.
Right.
They pulled that particular show that you appeared in.
Right. It was supposed to air, I think, the beginning of January, and then, well, it's going to be the end of January.
2012.
Yep. And then it's going to be the beginning of February, and that's going to be the end of February. Well, the beginning of March, and about that time I started wondering about what was going on. And last, July, I heard Jesse Ventura on a radio show saying he thought it was less than a 50% chance this series would ever see the light of day.
The whole series, or just
the
that
whole
one
series?
Show? Okay.
And the whole series got pulled last year. It was going round and round in edit mode. That's what they were telling me, that they need to keep editing it. And then something happened right after that, and it ended up in someone else's hands, and they needed to re-edit it to how they wanted it, and then voila, it came out.
Right, and so it was, you think it was re-edited from what it was originally intended to be then?
Right, because a different, as it was explained, a different group was in charge. And everyone has their own style for how they want it edited.
So, it seems like they were maybe going to pull it, and then they've just messed with it instead, you think?
Yeah, right. They edited it and how they wanted it. And what I was told that there were originally 8 episodes to the series, and they were going to air 7 of them.
All right. Now, and in that episode that you were in, he described the technology as a death ray. All right, and they went through the fact that Nikola Tesla had some of his research stolen off him in the 1940s, and that they'd continued some of his research, and that possibly this death ray, as they describe it, had been continued to be developed by the Reagan administration using the Star Wars Defense Initiative money, which, if you think about it, what Star Wars was alleged to be, it was to knock missiles out of the air and create this sort of invisible defensive shield. So that sounds plausible to me, that a death ray may have been developed. What are your thoughts on the use of that word and the general way that it was presented on conspiracy?
Well, the word is unfortunate. But if you remember in 2006, when I first started really showing a lot of the evidence, folks were saying, well, energy weapons don't exist. And I said, well, what do you think our tax dollars went to in the Star Wars program? So the first big series I put out there, the name of it was the Star Wars beam weapons, to sort of hit people in the head of, those people probably know what was used. If this is an energy weapon, certainly somebody running the Star Wars program would know what kind of thing it was. I didn't know the name of it, but that's how I started out. And this death ray business, that is rather unfortunate, but when I saw that that's what they're going to be calling the episode, I figured maybe that's the only way they could get this out.
Right.
Under the wire.
Because Jesse Ventura himself, I think, is trying to get the truth out, but perhaps he's not in total control of the edit and the show.
One thing I can say is every time I've heard him on a radio show talking about my work, he's never made a mistake.
Jesse Ventura was on the Alex Jones show recently. For those who don't know, Alex Jones has a radio show in America, which is, again, it covers conspiracy theories, if that's what you want to call them. And Jones was seen to accept what Jesse Ventura was saying about what he called the death ray, but really he was talking about an energy weapon, which that's not what my understanding of Alex Jones has been. From what I've learned about Alex Jones, he's always knocked back people who wanted to talk about your research. So do you think there's been a shift to just at least discuss it?
I don't know. And there was the next person on his program was Jesse's son, and that was another thing altogether. And it turned into people who support Dr. Wood are attacking him, and the other side's attacking these sides, attacking that side, and it seemed very divisive. Yeah,
I think perhaps what's going on is that when they're trying to hide something, the first
look over here.
Yeah, but they initially ignore it and make sure it doesn't get in the media. But when it gets to a certain level, they can't ignore it, so they then
mutate
colour it. Yeah. So perhaps there's a bit of that going on. Who
and
knows?
if I was going to rationalize, and excuse, how things are coming out, maybe the public can't handle, understanding exactly what happened with, interference of different energy forms. And so having it called one, a death ray or something. But what my work is about isn't really the same as, the kind of weapons they use to harass somebody. Just to I know that there's an abundance of these gizmos you can shine into somebody's house, and they feel like they have ants crawling up their leg, or and bug somebody at a personal level.
Right. So they're mixing your work with those kinds of
or you know, shoot somebody with a ray and have a heart attack. But there are field effects and energy weapons that cause field effects, and interference within those fields that cause various effects. That wasn't really covered, but maybe they thought that was too difficult for people to understand. Don't know. Now,
one question that often gets asked about you, Judy, is how come you're still alive if everything that you're saying is true?
Probably the same reason John Hutchison is crazy, insane, you know, get marginalized. That was their approach. If they can't marginalize you, then they have to take worse measures. And women are usually easier to marginalize. You know, a dumb broad, whatever.
I've never heard that one before. The women I've met aren't easy to marginalize.
But
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean.
And they prefer to go that route, I think.
Right.
And look at how effective it's been.
Yeah, yeah. All right, now I just want to touch on your academic career, because you were at Clemson University in South Carolina, and you were involved in researching 9/11 for about a year while you were still there, before you left. How did you find that?
Well, it's difficult for any university, college, or whatever to have this kind of thing going on within it to any large degree. I'm not implying anything about Clemson. I'm just saying an educational institution anywhere. You know, you have all sorts of trolls on the internet.
Trolls, yeah.
Yeah, either somebody's leading, or they're following, or they're in the way. If they're in the way, I call them a troll, just a generic term. And the trolls were writing to my department chair, to the dean, to my colleagues. I don't think anyone can function anywhere with that.
Because you would privately share some of your observations of 9/11 with other scientists, and they would agree with you, although they wouldn't come out and say it
but they don't want
themselves.
that to happen to them.
Yeah.
And if somebody has their own engineering firm, they're not going to want to get hung like that.
So let's just come on to, because in the last interview that we did, you said that some people, or some scientists, had reviewed the work positively. Is there any chance of any of them coming out and being named? Because that's one thing that's been used against you, or that I've heard on the internet. Oh, she's the only one with this.
They come out with all sorts of stuff. Recently, they've come out that all three of her degrees are from the same institution. Well, they're from different departments within the same institution. I think that's pretty good. But they'll find whatever they can find. But there are engineers who will stand up for me. One recently, they're starting to get more confidence in that. One recently was on a radio show with me and Andrew Johnson. He came on as Rob the engineer, professional engineer. We also have met several others. There was one the night before last, one in Manchester. And then at the Energy Conference, there's another fellow who is going to be helping to host a conference in Cardiff.
Right. All right, Judy, well, we're going to go for another break, and we'll be talking more about the evidence of 9/11 after this.